January 14th, 1944. The cold bit through every layer I wore, turning my fingers into useless clubs of flesh wrapped around my rifle. I was Corporal Vincent Rossi, 24th Guards Brigade, and I'd been staring at that monastery for 3 days straight. Monte Cassino. Even the name sounded holy, like something you'd whisper in church. The abbey sat up there on the ridge like God himself had planted it, as a reminder that men were small and war was smaller still, but God wasn't the one filling those walls with German guns. The wind carried the smell of cordite and wet stone down from the heights. My platoon, what was left of it, huddled in a shallow depression maybe 800 yards from the base of the mountain. Lieutenant Brennan had his map spread across his knees, the paper already dissolving in the drizzle that never seemed to stop. His finger traced a line up the slope, through terrain that looked like the devil's own staircase. "We go at 2300, Brennan said, not looking up. His voice was flat, like he'd already accepted what was coming. "Command wants eyes on the German positions before the main assault. We find their machine gun nests, mark them, and fall back before dawn." Private Johnny Walsh, we called him Dublin because he never shut up about it, let out a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "Before dawn. Right. And I suppose we'll be home for breakfast too?" Brennan's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. He didn't have to. We all knew this was a one-way ticket dressed up as reconnaissance. The Allied command had been throwing men at Monte Cassino for weeks now, and the mountain ate them like a beast that never got full. The Gustav Line, Hitler's fortress in Italy. The abbey at its crown, ancient and unmovable. I looked at the faces around me. Corporal Eddie Marsh, who'd been a fisherman before the war, and still smelled faintly of salt and tobacco. Rifleman Peter Hayes, barely 19, who kept a photograph of his girl folded in his helmet liner. Sergeant Tom Blackwood, older than the rest of us, with eyes that had seen too much already in North Africa. 8 men total, a patrol that command could afford to lose. Before we continue this story of survival against impossible odds, hit that subscribe button. These voices from Monte Cassino deserve to be heard. The rain picked up as the sun bled out behind the mountains. I cleaned my rifle for the 3rd time that hour, working the bolt action, checking the chamber. My Lee Enfield had gotten me through Tunisia and Sicily. I needed it to get me through one more night. Marsh was writing a letter by the light of a shielded candle, his hand moving slowly across the page. He'd been writing the same letter for 2 days, adding a line here and there, like he couldn't quite figure out how to say goodbye without admitting that's what it was. "You gonna finish that before we move out?" I asked, keeping my voice low. He looked up, rain dripping off the brim of his helmet. "Trying to. Keep thinking I've got more to say, then realizing it's all been said already." He folded the paper carefully, tucked it into an oilskin pouch. "My brother's gonna read this if I don't come back. I want him to know I was thinking straight at the end." "We're coming back," I said, but the words felt hollow even as they left my mouth. Blackwood moved among us as darkness settled in, checking gear, whispering last-minute instructions. "Stay tight. No noise. We move on, Hayes. He's got the best eyes. Rossi, you're rear guard. Dublin, you breathe wrong, and I'll shoot you myself." Dublin grinned, but there was no humor in it. "Wouldn't dream of it, Sarge." At 22:45, Brennan stood up. The signal. We rose like ghosts from the mud, 8 shapes in the darkness, and began our climb toward the monastery that waited above us like a judge, with its verdict already written. The mountain didn't just resist us, it fought us. Every step was a negotiation with gravity and mud and loose stone that could send you sliding back down with a clatter that might as well be a dinner bell for the Germans. We moved in single file, Hayes at the front, each man keeping one hand on the pack of the man ahead. The darkness was absolute. Cloud cover had smothered the moon, and the rain made everything slick and uncertain. I could hear breathing, the soft clink of equipment, the occasional scrape of a boot on rock. Nothing else. The war had gone quiet, like it was holding its breath. After an hour, We'd covered maybe 300 yards. My legs burned. My shoulders ached from the weight of my pack and ammunition. But I kept moving, one foot in front of the other, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant understanding exactly how exposed we were on this slope. Hayes raised a fist. We froze. I strained my ears, trying to hear what he'd heard. For a long moment, nothing. Then, voices. German, maybe 50 yards above us, carried on the wind. A patrol, or just sentries talking to pass the time. Blackwood moved forward, pressed his mouth to Hayes's ear. I couldn't hear what he said, but Hayes nodded and changed direction, angling us away from the voices. We waited in place for 10 minutes, not moving, barely breathing, while the German voices faded into the darkness. We pressed on. The terrain got worse. We were in a gully now, steep-sided, filled with loose shale that shifted under our weight. The abbey loomed somewhere above us, invisible but present, like a weight pressing down on the air itself. Dublin slipped. Just a small thing. His foot went out from under him, and he caught himself on his hands. But the stones he dislodged rattled down the slope with a sound like bones breaking. We all froze again, weapons ready, waiting for the shout, the flare, the machine gun fire that would tear us apart. 30 seconds, a minute, nothing. Brennan waved us forward. At 01:30, we reached what might charitably be called a position. A tumble of rocks that offered some cover, maybe 500 yards from the base of the monastery walls. We could see the building now, or rather its outline against the slightly less dark sky. It was massive, beautiful, in a way that made you forget men were dying for it. Brennan consulted his compass, then pointed. There. That's where the command thinks they've got heavy weapons. We need to get close enough to confirm. How close? Marsh asked. Close enough to see them. 200 yards, maybe less. 200 yards, in the open, with German positions all around us. Hayes spoke up for the first time, his voice barely a whisper. There's a ravine, runs northeast from here, might give us cover most of the way. Blackwood considered this, then nodded. Good eye. Rossi, Marsh, you're with me and Hayes. The rest are held here. We'll be back before 0300. If we're not, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. The 4 of us moved out, leaving the others behind. The ravine was barely deep enough to conceal us, more of a drainage cut than real cover, but it was better than nothing. We crawled, using elbows and knees, weapons cradled across our forearms. The stones tore at our uniforms, cold and sharp. I could taste mud and rain and fear. The monastery grew larger. I could make out details now. The damaged sections where earlier bombardments had chewed into the ancient stone, the dark squares of windows, the bell tower rising against the clouds, and lights, small ones, carefully shielded, but there, movement, activity. We were close enough now to hear them. German voices, speaking casually. Someone laughed. It was strange, hearing laughter in a place like this. It made them human, and I didn't want them to be human. I wanted them to be targets, nothing more. Blackwood raised his field glasses, scanning the monastery walls. I watched the darkness around us, every nerve screaming that we were too exposed, too close, that any second now. The flare shot up from somewhere to our left, turning night into day. The magnesium light hung in the sky like a small sun, swinging slowly on its parachute, illuminating everything. I pressed myself flat against the rocky ground, barely breathing, knowing that 4 British soldiers in a drainage ditch stood out like blood on snow. German voices, sharp now, urgent, the clatter of weapons. I heard Blackwood curse under his breath, a single word that contained all of our collective situation. Then the machine gun opened up. The MG-42. We called it Hitler's buzzsaw for the sound it made, not individual shots but a tearing noise, like fabric ripping at impossible speed. 1,200 rounds per minute. The rounds chewed up the rocks around us, throwing stone splinters that stung like hornets. I tried to make myself smaller, to sink into the earth itself. "Move!" Blackwood shouted, abandoning stealth for survival. "Back to the others!" We scrambled backward, still on our bellies, as more guns joined the first. Tracer rounds drew orange lines through the darkness, crisscrossing above us. I heard Hayes cry out, saw him clutch his shoulder, but he kept moving. We all kept moving. The flare died. Darkness rushed back in, but it wasn't salvation. It was just a different kind of trap. The Germans knew we were here now. They were firing blind, but there were so many guns that blind was enough. Mortars started dropping, the crump of their impacts walking toward us. I reached the rocks where we'd left the others. Dublin grabbed my webbing and hauled me over, his face white in the darkness. "What the hell happened?" "Flare," I gasped. "They made us." Brennan was already on the radio, his voice clipped and urgent. "Tower, this is Shepherd 3. We are compromised. Repeat, compromised. Taking heavy fire. Request immediate." The transmission cut off as a mortar round landed 20 yards away, the blast wave slapping us like a giant's hand. My ears rang. I tasted blood and didn't know if it was mine. More flares went up. The entire mountainside lit up, and I saw the full nightmare of our situation. We were in a bowl, surrounded on 3 sides by higher ground. German positions ringed us, machine gun nests, mortar pits, riflemen in prepared positions. They had us in a kill box, and they were taking their time about it. "We have to move," Marsh was shouting, though I could barely hear him through the ringing in my ears. "We stay here, we're dead." "Move where?" Dublin shot back. "Up is Germans. Down is open ground. We're pinned." Brennan's face was gray. He looked at his map, then at the terrain around us, and I saw the moment he understood that the map didn't matter anymore. Maps were for situations that still had solutions. Hayes was bleeding badly, his shoulder soaked through. Young Peter was trying to bandage it with shaking hands, but the blood kept coming. Blackwood fired short bursts up the slope, not aiming at anything in particular, just trying to keep their heads down. Another mortar barrage walked through our position. This time we weren't lucky. Private Wilson, I'd barely spoken to him, didn't even know his first name, took shrapnel in the chest and throat. He made a sound like he was trying to speak, trying to ask a question, and then he wasn't making any sound at all. "We go down," Blackwood said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Fast, before they adjust fire. We get off this mountain, or we die on it. No third option." Brennan looked like he wanted to argue, to pull rank, to insist on the mission. But then he looked at Wilson's body, at Hayes bleeding, at the rest of us waiting for an order that made sense, and he nodded. "On me," he said. "Stay tight. We move fast and low. Leave everything we can't carry." We stripped our packs, keeping only weapons, ammunition, and water. Hayes tried to stand and nearly fell. I got under his good shoulder, took his weight. He was heavier than he looked, or maybe I was weaker than I thought. The flares died again. In the darkness, we moved. Down the mountain, slipping, sliding, half running, half falling. The Germans were still firing, but they were shooting at where we'd been, not where we were. Not yet. We had maybe 2 minutes before they figured it out. I focused on keeping Hayes upright, on not breaking an ankle in the loose stone, on breathing. The monastery receded above us, and I thought, we failed. We accomplished nothing. Wilson died for nothing. Then Peter stepped on a mine. The blast threw me sideways. I lost my grip on Hayes, hit the ground hard, tasted dirt and copper. My hearing was gone again, replaced by a high-pitched whine. I rolled over, tried to get up, couldn't understand why my legs weren't working. Through the smoke and dust, I saw Peter. What was left of him? Marsh was screaming, but I couldn't hear it. Brennan was on the radio again, his mouth moving, probably calling for medevac that would never come. Hayes grabbed my collar, his face inches from mine. His lips moved. "Get up. Move." I got up. I moved. We ran out of the mountain around 0300. The ground leveled out into a field of mud and broken stone, pockmarked with shell craters that had filled with rainwater. We were 6 now. Wilson is gone. Peter is gone. The rest of us were bleeding from a dozen different wounds. Some we'd noticed and some we hadn't. The German guns had stopped. Either they'd lost us in the darkness, or they were waiting for daylight to finish the job properly. We used the silence to put distance between us and Monte Cassino, moving in an exhausted stumble that couldn't quite be called running. Blackwood found a crater deep enough to hide us. We slid into it, into water up to our knees, black and cold and stinking of chemicals. No one complained. We were alive to complain, and that seemed like a gift we hadn't earned. Hayes was in bad shape. The shoulder wound had stopped bleeding, but his face was the color of old paper, and he was shaking. Marsh worked on him with the medical supplies we had left, which wasn't much. Morphine, sulfa powder, bandages already soaked through. "How long until dawn?" Dublin asked, his voice hollow. Brennan checked his watch, the luminous dial ghostly in the darkness. 2 hours, maybe less. And then they'll see us, and they'll shell us, and we'll be dead by breakfast. The honesty was almost refreshing. No more pretending this was reconnaissance, that we had a mission worth dying for. We were just trying to survive until someone could pull us out, and maybe not even that. I sat with my back against the crater wall, feeling the cold seep into my bones. My rifle lay across my lap, caked with mud. I wondered if it would even fire. I wondered if it mattered. "My brother," Marsh said suddenly, "is going to read that letter and think I went out doing something that mattered. He's going to tell everyone I died a hero." No one responded. What could we say? The sky began to lighten. Not the sun rising. We weren't lucky enough to see the sun. But the clouds turning from black to gray, darkness lifting to reveal just how exposed we really were. "There," Blackwood said, pointing. Through the rain we could see the monastery clearly now, and from the monastery we saw muzzle flashes. They'd spotted us. The shells started falling again. Closer this time, methodical. They were walking fire toward our crater, adjusting after each salvo. We pressed ourselves into the mud, into each other, making ourselves as small as possible. A shell landed 10 yards away, then 5 yards. The next one would be on top of us. "Run," Brennan said. Not an order, just a statement of fact. We climbed out of the crater and ran through open ground with nowhere to hide, while high explosive shells chased us. Ran while machine gun fire from the monastery walked across the mud toward us. Ran because running was all we had left. I don't remember making the decision to turn back for Hayes. He'd fallen, his legs finally giving out, and I just went back. Grabbed his webbing, dragged him. Dublin appeared on his other side, and together we hauled him forward while the world exploded around us. Through the smoke, I saw shapes, moving toward us. For a moment, I thought, Germans. This is where it ends. Then I recognized the helmets, British. A patrol from the 2nd Brigade, sent forward to cover the retreat. "Get down," someone shouted, and we dropped as British machine guns opened up, suppressing the German fire. Hands grabbed us, pulled us to cover behind a low stone wall. A medic was working on Hayes, moving with the calm efficiency of someone who'd done this 100 times. Lieutenant Brennan was talking to a captain I didn't recognize, pointing back toward Monte Cassino, his hands shaking. The captain listened, nodded, and wrote something in a notebook. Making a report, documenting another failure. The monastery still stood on its mountain, untouched, eternal. We'd accomplished nothing except surviving, and even that felt like it had cost too much. The field hospital was in a bombed-out villa, 10 miles behind the line. Hayes lost the arm. The doctors tried to save it, but the damage was too extensive. He was evacuated to Naples 2 days later, and I never saw him again. Marsh finished his letter, added a final paragraph about Peter, about Wilson, about men who deserved better than they got. He sent it home, and 3 weeks later we learned his brother had been killed in France. The letter never arrived. Neither did Marsh. A sniper got him during the second battle for the monastery. Dublin made it through. Last I heard he was back in Ireland, working in a pub, telling stories that got bigger with each telling. I hope he's happy. I hope someone believes his stories. Blackwood took a commission, became a lieutenant, led men into battles that made Monte Cassino look like a garden party. He survived the war but died in a car accident in 1953. The universe has a sense of humor, I suppose. Brennan put me in for a medal. I never asked for what. Never received it either. I think he felt guilty for leading us up that mountain, for Wilson and Peter and all the ones who came after. As if medals could balance those scales. The monastery fell, eventually. The Allies bombed it flat, turned 1,500 years of history into rubble, and discovered the Germans hadn't even been inside. They'd positioned themselves in the rocks around it, using the abbey as a landmark, while they swore to Rome they weren't touching it. After the bombing, they moved into the ruins. Took 3 more months to finally push them out. I never went back. Never wanted to. But sometimes, on cold mornings, when the rain won't stop, I'm back in that crater, waiting for dawn that never came, waiting for shells that never stopped, waiting to die with men whose names I still remember. Monte Cassino taught me that some missions don't have heroes, some battles don't have glory. Sometimes you're just a man in the mud, trying to see morning, and the only victory is opening your eyes when the sun finally rises. We lost that patrol, lost the battle, lost the war for that mountain, at least for a while. But I'm still here, telling this story, and maybe that's the only victory that ever mattered. We waited for dawn that never came, but somewhere, somehow, we found it anyway.